Parshat Naso, as I said. And this story was written in this book, the Idra, which was later placed in the general Zohar corpus of teachings after Rabbi Shimon passed away. But when he was alive, it was written down. And so we're talking about not a past tense. We're reading it now, past tense, but in the story, it's not really past tense. It happened while they were alive in their bodies. Rabbi Shimon. So Rabbi Shimon said, Tavatna alahu hagir hartzan mare de sare. It's a very fancy language. Remember, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was 13 years in a cave, and Eliyahu and Navi came to him twice a day to learn, teach him. So it says, we're missing that. Hagir is like a person who is limps or walks funny, could be bent over. And hartzan is like usually like the seeds of a grape. Mare de sare, and he has long, wild hair, which Eliyahu Navi was described as that, and I believe it's because he was a Nazir, where they don't cut their hair. Why is not found in the Beit Idra? The Beit Idra literally means the house of the gathering. Now, there are ruins in the north, on the road between Tzfat and Meron, where the Idrot and many other caves and burial sites are located, where this Idra stands. And it was a place where Rabbi Shimon and his students would gather to learn, and it was a place where Eliyahu would visit them. So, when you get used to being visited by Eliyahu Navi, then you wonder where he is. Why hasn't he come? Idra din bezimna ditkalia milini la in kadishim, because at this gathering we're going to reveal super upper holy words. And it's fitting that he's here. And immediately, of course, Eliyahu shows up. And 3 shining sparks were on his face. Now, what does that mean? The text doesn't tell us. The commentators just say they just translate it. But I believe it means that certain sparks on Eliyahu's face. Okay, you could say his face is always going to be lit up. He's a soul that traverses heaven and earth and time and space. So you'd think his face is going to be pretty bright. But these sparks, I believe, are also there because of his mission. Well, we'll see more. Right, he came. Rabbi Shimon said to Eliyahu, "My tama lo shachiach mor bekarduta galifa de mareim beyom de hilula." Why is the master not come for this event where we're going to, engrave, so to speak, these holy new words at our hilula, at our celebration of joy? Now, the word hilula nowadays is used almost exclusively in the Sephardi world for a yortzeit, in the Yiddish term, right, for the day marking the passing of a tzaddik. Like Lag BaOmer is called the Hilula, the celebration of joy of Rabbi Shimon, but also marks the day of his passing. But it also, in the ancient Mishnah language, it was used also for a wedding or a bar mitzvah or any big party that someone would throw, would be called a Hilula. Okay, but so Rabbi Shimon's asking him, why weren't you at the party? Okay, Amarle. So he said to him, Chayecha Rebbe, by your life, Rebbe. You see, Eliyahu Navi's calling Rabbi Shimon Rebbe. That's a big deal. Shama Yomin it beriru, excuse me, Sheva Yamin. It beriru kameku chabrichu koli nun the yetun ishtachuni me. You should know that 7 days God was choosing the people that would be there at that gathering. And he's telling him, in other words, if I wasn't there, well, there's a reason that I wasn't there, but God had already chosen who would be there. So that's also teaching us that when things happen, it doesn't mean that they're just happening instantaneously, but rather that, well, maybe Hashem is thinking ahead. Maybe Hashem can do that, Do we ascribe forethought to God? Of course we do. So Eliyahu was telling him, these people that are going to be in this gathering have been invited there. And those that would come or not come to your idra, your gathering. Right? And we wanted to come, but I had a special responsibility. He uses this interesting language, tied to my shoulder. Now, what? When you give somebody a mission, here, deliver this letter, he wouldn't probably call it tying it to his shoulder. But when we find out the mission that Eliyahu had, maybe there's something significant here. This responsibility. The reason he's giving for why he wasn't able to make the Hilula of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. Second mentioning of Hilula of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. And because it had this responsibility attached to my shoulder, I couldn't come. Because that very day, the Holy One, blessed be He, sent me on a mission to do a miracle for Rav Hamnuna Saba, who was buried in a cave right across from Rabbi Shimon's cave, and they were colleagues. They were both on the level of having constant miracles done for them and his students. So Eliyahu was telling him, I had to go do some miracles for these great rabbis. I see we have some chats. Hopefully I'll get to those. Okay. Because Rabbi Hamnuna Saba and his students were captured by the Romans and put into prison. But it doesn't say any prison. It says the Armon of the king, the king's palace. In other words, the Romans were occupying Eretz Yisrael, and they had structures that they used for their administration of their power, which is very interesting. If you notice, governments are always building buildings, right? Because buildings are a symbol of power. And of course, they're very useful if you want to hold people against their will. So they were in this Armon of the king. It's Rachishna Lum Nisa, and we did a miracle for him. The Ramena Lahu Kotala, that we knocked over a wall. The Hechala Damalka, of the palace of the king, which would be the Caesar. Now remember, the Caesar, of course, was in Rome, but he always had one person assigned as the ruler of Judea. Okay, now they're calling him here the king. Now, it could be that king, but it doesn't say a Roman legionnaire. It doesn't say the general, the consul of the Caesar. It says a king. The wall of the king. Keep these phrases in mind. With Katru Katroi, and they were buried under boulders. They were buried. They were crushed. The mitu arba'im v'hamisha, and 45 ministers, pardashke, I looked it up just to check it. It could mean minister or policeman. Interesting. Were killed when Eliyahu went in and knocked that wall over. I had a feeling, an image like he gave the wall his shoulder. That's why he said it was it was tied to his shoulder. I don't know. Well, maybe that's because I played football. And then I took out Rav Hamnuna and his students. Ramenu lon lebikat ono, and I lifted them up. Olichna is in the parentheses, which means basically he did another miracle for them and flew them out of there where this event had taken place. And they were brought water, and bread was brought before them because they hadn't eaten for 3 days while in captivity. And all those days I did not leave them. So Eliyahu is giving a very nice, clear story about what happened and where he was and what he was doing and why he wasn't at the Hilula of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. And we see 45 ministers were killed. And Kad Tavna, Eshkanan Baparsa Denat Lukoli Nun Samchin. And they came to a place where they found it's called a samchin, but it turns out to be a carriage of angels in the translation. See, so the Zohar is not going to give you language like that. The translator will. In other words, and what happened? Tlat min chavraya Allah. Well, how do we know it was a transport of angels? Because there was an angel holding this, I want to call it a raft, but it obviously wasn't like that, but it was something that 3 of Rabbi Hamnuna's students were lifted up to heaven. In other words, they died after all these other things had happened. And we asked them, they said, they asked, well, why did these 3 rabbis die right after this miracle was done to save them? What's the point of saving them if they're just going to go back up to heaven? And they said, this is the portion of Hashem from the Hilula of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. Zaka'ah ant, Rabbi Shimon. Meritorious are you, Rabbi Shimon. Zaka'ah hulkan be'inun havraya, and so too is meritorious is the portion of your students, the yatvin kamach, that are sitting before you. How many great levels have you acquired for the world to come? And how many flaming torches will be brought to you of light, brought for you of light there. Okay, and that's the basic end of the story. So, I trust that as I gave that over, I made it clear enough, some of the remezim, some of the allusions in that story that seemed to somehow reverberate from what happened in Meron. Of course, these were 45 Roman ministers. We had 45 holy Jews. The 3 rabbis who went up, who were they? We don't see that necessarily in the story. But over and over, it keeps mentioning the Hilula of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. And it's not a wedding. The commentator of the Mitok Midvash, Rav Daniel Frisch, says it was called the wedding because of the revelation of new Torah teachings is like the joy of a wedding. The excitement of something new coming into the world, a new couple, or hear new words of the secrets of Torah that have never been revealed before. But let's step back. Okay. A friend of mine, my neighbor a few doors down 14 years ago, was murdered in the forest. And we found in Likutei Moran, in the 38th Torah, a few paragraphs down, entire paragraph. Now, in that paragraph, it's talking about a great rabbi, and Rabbi Nachman is using that a piece of Talmud to teach us another teaching. And in the paragraph, he says that 16 sharpened swords passed over this rabbi's body. My friend Erez Lebanon had 16 knife wounds in him. It says later in the paragraph, it mentions Bat Ayin, the place it happened. It also mentions his name, Erez Lebanon, is a nickname that the Talmud gives. It means literally, of course, the cedar of Lebanon, which was the wood of choice of the day that they used to build King David's house. And of course, cedars of Lebanon is a famous phrase. It's also used, some cedars were obviously used in the Beit HaMikdash. So all those facts, those details appeared at the same time in the Likutei Moharan, as these details were kind of surrounding this terrible event that happened here. So what was it? It wasn't a direct communication, God telling the prophet what's going to happen. But Rabbi Nachman said those words 200 years ago, and in his Torah. But it turns out that all those details came up in this story here. So what's happening? What's happening in the story of the Idra Rabbah, which was spoken like 1800 years ago and written into the book of the Zohar 1800 years ago. And then last week we have this new story. And again, we have these parallel details. Okay. Well, remember what I said. No two people have the same level of divine inspiration, Ruach HaKodesh, or prophecy. Every single person is on a different level, so every person's revelation is going to be different. Whether it's Rabbi Nachman in 1800s or Rabbi Shimon in the year 300. I just learned in the Kabbalist Baruch, I missed that point. Okay. A time lag. Okay, Rhonda, that's one way to explain it. One way of understanding it is that, remember, we live in time, we live in place and space, but this information is not coming from time and place and space. It's coming from above these categories of reality that we deal with all the time. It's coming from a unified place where all the information is one, because God is one and his mind is one and his view of reality is one. And so the information is passing from the level of one to the level of infinity. Infinite locations, infinite times, infinite spaces, infinite people. I mean, of course, not infinite people, but let's figure if there's 7 billions on the planet today, how many there have been over the last 6,000 years. It's an interesting statistic. I don't know if they've ever generated an estimation of that. Maybe someone has run across that number. Probably you could Google it. How many people have lived on the planet since the beginning? A lot more than 7 billion. Okay, but the point is that the information is released into the world and each person picks up what they do because of their own particular level. And that's why when King Saul went to visit Shmuel, the prophet, right? Get my Hebrew, I'm speaking Hebrewish now. It's getting late. The minute that Shaul got close to Shmuel, in the Tanakh says he fell down on the ground and started prophesying. It doesn't tell us what he said, meaning that there's no necessary reason to write down what the king was saying there when he fell into prophecy. What it's teaching us, though, is that there was a wave of spiritual power coming down to Shmuel and his students, and he got hit by the wave. Okay, and he picked up whatever he could pick up, and it knocked him straight on the ground. And many times when the Meraglim gave over their bad report about Eretz Yisrael, Moshe and Aaron hit the deck. They went straight to the ground because of the power of the negative speech. Okay, but let's not go to the negative. The point is this phenomenon that we're talking about here has many, many layers. And this piece of Idra is not a direct prophecy of what happened, but it is a pickup, so to speak, of pieces of the information. And if we choose to, which we're all free individuals to choose, we can say, wow, there's something there. Or we can say, no, don't connect too many dots. You're pushing, you're stretching the envelope. I don't know if that works. Most envelopes don't stretch, right? You're pushing out the envelope too far. Or as my friends used to say, you're reaching. But the point is that, and this is the thing that we have to really grasp that connects to what we talked about earlier. These three rabbis that were lifted up to heaven, they were going to Rabbi Shimon's Hilula. They weren't sad to leave one party here on earth to go to a party in heaven. The people that are sad are the people who are left behind. But if you notice people's language after these events, someone was saying today, oh, I feel so bad for them. They died. Of course, they died in a very unpleasant way. No question about that. And there was great suffering, and no, let's not even go there. It lasted as long as the suffering lasted, and then it was over. But they were going to the Hilula of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. And, you know, Rabbi Avraham Levi, who was a great rabbi and student of the Arizal in that generation, almost 500 years ago, he was punished for saying Nahum, which is what we say in a fast day, you know, asking God for forgiveness. He was punished for saying that at Rabbi Shimon's Hilula. In other words, on a day of joy, you don't introduce sadness. On Shabbat, I could not go up the hill to daven at the kever of Rabbi Shimon because I knew I would start crying and I would be sad. Now, there is, of course, there's happy crying in prayer with longing and desire and enthusiasm of a very high level. That's fine. But, you know, I knew personally that I couldn't go up there the day after these people had died there and act normal like a Shabbat would require me to act. So I stayed in our camp and I prayed there and it was everything was fine. Afterwards, we went back up to the mountain when it wasn't Shabbat because we don't mix the sadness and the joy. The joy is the joy. The challenge is for us to attach ourselves to the joy, even in the midst of this horrendous thing, to attach ourselves to the joy because that's where they are. We're the ones that are sad And of course, the families are sad too. But if you know, if you were visited by a dead relative and they told you how happy they were to be out of their body and into heaven, you might feel a little different. And that's happened to people. People are visited by dead loved ones. People that are suffering in a body. I mean, I worked in a hospice. There was one guy there who was in 17 years. He had not moved from his bed. You know what that is, suffering? 17 years. And he wasn't in coma, where in coma, it's not the same level as being awake and unable to do anything, lying in bed. Now, wouldn't you rather just get it over with? You know, push a button and leave? Of course you would. So when we talk about death and we talk about tragedy and we talk about these painful events, we need to open the lens super wide. We need to really see the big picture, and not the blame picture, not the conspiratorial picture, and none of this kind of stuff. We need to see the bigger picture of what is going on with those souls and to embrace their joy, because they're in joy. When I'm feeling pain, I'm not feeling their pain. I'm feeling my pain, my loss, but it's not really about me. So that's a little bit selfish. My pain, my loss. What's that? Okay, if you're a mother, you're a father, you're a brother, you're a best friend, okay, we understand. It's a little different. There's more pain, there's more connection, there's more loss. But let's be honest, it's not about the dead. The dead are happy. The dead are in a place of complete expansion. Your body is a constriction of your soul. The first thing that happens when you leave your body is like, whoa, that's heavy. I don't want to carry that thing around anymore. And by the way, you can't experience that in meditation. So those are just some words that I thought would help, the ideas I've been working on for a while, because, I was, trying to look at this Zohar. They're not talking about anybody being sad over there. Of course, it was the Roman ministers or policemen, whoever they were. They're the ones who got crushed, and not the sweet, young, beautiful Jews over there in Meron. Now, on a further out note, if we want to really go out into left field, we don't know who those souls were and where they came from and why they were chosen. But a friend of mine did have a dream the night after, on Shabbos night, the night after the event. And in the dream, he saw a hand come down out of the sky. It's a dream, right? It's like a cartoon, right? Whatever you want to think. The hand came down, and the hand was picking some people and putting them on one side of the room, and picking up people and placing them on the other side of the room. Which I think the shot of that dream is that God is choosing what he's doing. He knows what he's doing way ahead of time. Way ahead of time. Here, Eliyahu says God was choosing the guests of the Idra 7 days in advance. That's not much time in God's calendar. So I took it more like a spiritual challenge. Can I be in joy and sadness? Can I feel the pain and still be in joy? And that's each person's choice, to try to go there. But Rabbi Nachman does teach, and it's a statement from the rabbis, from the sages, that en yisurim ela b'dat, that all the suffering we feel is only depending on our consciousness. If we have expanded consciousness, I should say it this way, the more expanded your consciousness, the less pain you feel. Now, when the students of Rabbi Nachman went to him and said, Rabbi, how can you be here on the hillside watching the fire? And he said, well, because I understand this is all from Hashem, but he added on, I could not be down there where everybody's screaming and crying and running in chaos because of the fire, because my mood and it is not attuned to their mood, and my feelings are not where their feelings are. And so there is a level of sensitivity and appropriateness that is also being addressed here. That if you go to a Shiva call, you don't go in smiling and talking about how great it is to die. It's kind of absurd, right? But in your heart, you can. If you're there, you can't fake it either. But I think with this Meron tragedy, which is a week ago tonight, maybe right now as we were speaking, I remember, I think, the reason I didn't go up to the site, I was going to go visit the Nar Shalom tent, which happened to be exactly over the Zaka emergency treatment facility in Meron. And I was headed right there, and I had to teach my class on Lighthouse. So the Lighthouse protected me from going up and seeing the horrible sights that people saw up there that night. And I know a lot of people are traumatized because they saw bodies and they saw dead people, and it wasn't nice. And so I feel like God protected me from that, because I don't like to see things like that. Anyways, so I hope this piece of Zohar teaches us something, and I hope that we can kind of see it the way they saw it. Nobody seems to be mourning these three rabbis that were taken up. They asked why, and they said because they're being taken to the Hulula. Wouldn't that be nice if after you pass away, someone asks, why did they take him? Well, he's going to Rabbi Shimon's yeshiva. He's got to go back to, he's got to be on time for Seder. Would you be sad if you knew that the soul was going to such a great place? No, I wouldn't be sad. It would, it would be nice to know it, right? That people were visited by their lost ones, their lost loved ones, and they said, "Don't cry for me. I'm fine. I'm on the road. I'm on the high road here. I'm going up to Rabbi Shimon's Hilula in heaven." Wouldn't that make the parents feel better? Now, there's a letter circulating around the internet from Mrs. Sue Koltai, I believe is her name. I'm sure you can find it. It's all over WhatsApp. And she writes a beautiful thing. Her son was lost in the event, and he was taken up, obviously, to Rabbi Shimon and the Hilula there. And she writes about it in a very beautiful way. And I'm sure you could do a search and find it. It's worth reading because it's from a mother who lost her child. But did she lose her child? Maybe Rabbi Shimon gained a student.